When word first leaked that President Ibrahim Traoré was invited to a closed-door security briefing in Washington, D.C., his closest advisors begged him not to go. Some called it a trap. Others feared he would disappear the moment he set foot on American soil. But Traoré knew fear could not run a free nation. So under a cold January sky, he boarded a discreet government jet bound for the United States. No press, no entourage, only 2 loyal guards and his sharpest mind. Upon arrival, a convoy of black SUVs whisked him away to an unmarked government compound deep in Virginia woods. No flags, no reporters, just steel doors and men in suits with eyes that didn't blink. Inside, a windowless conference room buzzed with the hum of hidden recorders. Traoré sat alone on one side of a polished oak table. Across from him sat 4 American officials, 2 from the State Department, 1 from the Pentagon, and 1 whose name no one ever spoke aloud, a senior handler from the CIA. "Mr. President," the handler began, his voice syrup-smooth but razor-sharp underneath. "Burkina Faso is on a dangerous path. Russian advisors, Chinese investments, pushing France out. You're destabilizing the balance." Traoré leaned back, calm as a sleeping lion. "No, gentlemen, we are stabilizing our independence. Maybe that makes you uncomfortable." One of the men slid a folder across the table. Inside were grainy surveillance photos, alleged rebel chatter transcripts, carefully arranged to paint Traoré's government as fueling insurgency for foreign arms deals. The message was clear: cooperate or be branded a threat. Outside, a winter wind howled against the compound walls. Inside, the youngest African leader of a generation stared down the men who believed they could bend him. He didn't blink. The room fell into a heavy silence, broken only by the low hum of a hidden air vent. Traoré pushed the folder back toward the CIA handler without even opening it fully. His calm voice sliced through the tension. "You think I came here to be threatened? You underestimate Africans again." One of the State Department men tried to soften the moment. He leaned forward, clasping his hands. "President Traoré, let's be reasonable. The intelligence community just wants assurances you're not shifting allegiances that could create instability in West Africa." Traoré raised an eyebrow. "Instability? My people have been poor for 60 years under your so-called stability. We're choosing something different now. I won't apologize for it." Behind him, his 2 bodyguards, young men from the same dusty villages where Traoré once herded goats, stood like shadows, their eyes locked on every movement in the room. The CIA handler tapped the table, a quiet threat hidden in his polite smile. "If you won't cooperate, we have ways of influencing circumstances. Regime change is not off the table." Traoré's face didn't flinch, but his voice turned to stone. "You try to topple me, you better kill me. Because if I stand back up, I will hunt down every hand that fed that plot." No one laughed. Not this time. One of the Pentagon officers broke the tension by sliding over a second folder. "There's an alternative, Mr. President. Economic aid, new security partnerships, debt relief. All you have to do is align with us. Push out the Russians, slow down the Chinese deals, let France regain some assets." Traoré's eyes swept the table. The files, the polished wood, the men whose words dripped poison behind smiles. And he realized in that moment, this was not a negotiation, it was an ambush. Outside, the wind rattled the walls again, as if the whole building shivered at what was about to unfold. Traoré folded his hands, leaning forward just enough to lock eyes with the CIA handler. For the first time since entering the compound, he let a flicker of steel burn in his gaze. "You want me to betray my people's future in exchange for a few dollars and fake promises of protection? Africa has seen this movie before. We know how it ends. Not again." The handler's polite facade cracked, just for a heartbeat. "Careful, Mr. President. Pride is a luxury. Presidents disappear every day." Traoré chuckled, low and cold. "So do empires." Suddenly, his chief bodyguard, Diallo, stepped closer. His hand hovered near his jacket. a silent warning that any move toward the president would be met with blood. The Pentagon officer cleared his throat, shifting the tension. Look, nobody wants conflict. We can arrange favorable trade terms, development funds, the kind that can win elections for a long time. All you have to do is sign an understanding that you'll limit Russian presence and delay certain Chinese mining rights. Traoré tapped the table slowly, a drumbeat that echoed in the handler's mind. You offer money like I'm for sale. I was not born in a palace, gentlemen. I was born in a mud hut. I have slept on dirt floors. No amount of dollars will buy my country's dignity. Outside, snowfall began drifting down the compound's rooftop. Inside, the air felt thicker, charged with the truth no one dared to admit. This young African leader was not afraid to walk away or burn bridges behind him. The CIA handler leaned back, assessing him anew. He signaled a junior agent at the door. "Bring it in." Moments later, a metal briefcase was placed before Traoré. The latch clicked open, revealing stacks of cash and an unmarked black folder. It wasn't a bribe, it was a leash. "Last chance," the handler said softly. "Take the deal or walk into a storm you cannot survive." Traoré looked at the briefcase, then at his motherland's flag pin on his jacket lapel. He smiled. Traoré's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. He slowly pushed the briefcase back across the polished table, the heavy hush in the room amplifying every sliding inch of rejection. "You must think Africa is still chained to your mercy," he said, his voice calm but ringing like a judge's hammer. "But we learned. My father taught me never to trust a man who smiles while holding a knife behind his back." The CIA handler's fingers drummed on the armrest, impatience breaking through his calculated calm. "Mr. President, you're making a mistake you won't live to regret." At that, Diallo, Traoré's guard, stepped fully into the light, his coat parting enough to show a holstered sidearm. The unspoken message was clear. Any sudden move toward the president would end badly for everyone. A flicker of fear danced across the Pentagon man's eyes, but he masked it quickly with a cough. "Let's de-escalate this. Nobody wants bloodshed here." Traoré stood, his chair scraping back with a sound sharp enough to pierce the room's heavy silence. He looked each man in the eye, one by one, a silent audit of their fear, their arrogance, their disbelief that an African leader would dare reject their leash. "I came here on my own 2 feet, he said. "I will leave the same way, head high, not bowed." He turned to his guards, giving them a subtle nod. Diallo radioed a short command. Outside, 3 more security men, Burkina Faso Special Forces, loyal only to Traoré, positioned themselves along the corridor leading back to the armored convoy waiting outside. The handler leaned forward, voice lowering to an almost fatherly whisper. "You walk out of here. You walk into a world of pain, Mr. President. We can make your own people turn on you." Traoré didn't even glance back. His parting words hung in the air like thunder. "Then let them come. I'm not afraid of the storm. I am the storm." The steel doors swung open with a hiss of hydraulics as Traoré and his guards stepped into the cold Virginia night. Snowflakes swirled under the harsh security lights that ringed the compound. Somewhere in the woods, hidden cameras whirred, recording every step, proof for Washington that their guest had not been persuaded. Diallo leaned close as they walked. "Mr. President, should we switch routes back to the jet? They may try something." Traoré's breath fogged in the frozen air. He didn't break stride. "Let them try. Burkina Faso does not kneel, not here, not anywhere." Behind him, the CIA handler watched from the doorway, a shadow among shadows. He tapped his earpiece. Somewhere down the hill, 2 black SUVs idled, unmarked but unmistakably American. Insurance in case the African lion decided to roar too loudly on U.S. soil. As Traoré's convoy rolled out of the compound, Diallo scanned the tree line through tinted windows. Every flicker of movement, every drifting branch looked like an ambush waiting to happen. Inside the car, Traoré closed his eyes for a heartbeat. His mind replayed every word exchanged in that cold conference room. He knew the cost of defiance, The rumors, the fake news, the leaked corruption files that would appear magically overnight to stain his name. He knew traitors inside his own cabinet would suddenly find foreign bank accounts fattening up. But he also knew this: if he caved today, Burkina Faso would never truly stand tomorrow. Diallo's voice cut through his thoughts. "Sir, we are approaching the airstrip. It's clear so far." Traoré opened his eyes, calm, unwavering. "Good. When we land, summon the council. They must hear what just happened. Every word. We will not hide in fear." Outside the convoy window, snow fell heavier, but Traoré felt only heat, the fire that had carried him from a poor village to a seat across from America's darkest power brokers. He whispered to himself, "Let them come." Back on the private jet, the hum of the engines was a familiar comfort, a cocoon of calm after the storm he'd just walked through. Traoré sat by the window, staring into the icy darkness above the Atlantic, his mind racing with the weight of what came next. Diallo sat across from him, sorting through secure sat phone messages from Ouagadougou. Each new ping confirmed what they'd expected. The Americans were already working their next move. "Mr. President, we intercepted a chatter thread," Diallo said, lowering his voice. "Anonymous accounts are pushing rumors you embezzled aid money. Fake reports. It's spreading." Traoré didn't flinch. "They can plant lies, but they can't plant shame in a man who fears none." Diallo hesitated, then asked the question every loyal soldier fears to ask his leader. "Sir, was it worth it, facing them alone? Rejecting everything they dangled in front of you?" Traoré turned from the window, the reflection of the cabin lights catching the fierce steadiness in his eyes. "I was not alone. My ancestors were with me. My people were with me. And when we stand together, no empire can buy us." The plane jolted slightly through turbulence, but the moment only solidified the resolve in the cabin. Diallo's secure tablet chimed again. This time, it was good news. The Council of Ministers was convening the second they landed. Traoré would address them directly. No leaks, no spin. Outside the jet's reinforced glass, a crescent moon glowed like a sentinel. Somewhere in Washington, men in suits planned new traps. But here in the sky, Ibrahim Traoré was untouchable, for now. He closed his eyes briefly, lips moving in a whisper meant only for the ancestors who had walked this earth before him. "Watch me, guide me, strengthen me." And far below, Africa waited for the roar that would follow. When the wheels touched down on the darkened military airstrip outside Ouagadougou, Traoré was no longer just a defiant president. He was a symbol returning home from the lion's den, alive and unbent. Soldiers lined the tarmac, their silhouettes rigid in the floodlights, rifles slung but ready. Diallo opened the jet's door, scanning the night. A convoy of armored vehicles idled nearby, engines rumbling low like waiting predators. At their head stood Colonel Bako, commander of the Presidential Guard, the last firewall if the Americans made good on any threats. "Mr. President, we secured the perimeter. Council is waiting at the palace," Bako said, saluting sharply. Traoré descended the steps slowly, each footstep echoing off the metal, grounding him back on Burkina soil. He inhaled the dry Sahel air, harsh, honest, nothing like the suffocating diplomacy of Washington. Inside the lead SUV, Traoré and Diallo rode in silence at first. The city's outskirts flickered past, half-finished roads, dim street lamps, children bundled under blankets outside kiosks selling tea and bread. The very people whose hopes had sent a village boy to the presidential palace, and now demanded he stand unshaken. Diallo finally broke the silence. "Sir, the cabinet is restless. Some ministers fear the Americans will squeeze our economy. They're afraid of sanctions." Traoré's eyes stayed on the road ahead. "Fear is what feeds them. I won't share their fear. Tonight they will hear exactly what price freedom demands." He knew whispers already churned. Some would call him reckless, some would praise him as a new Sankara reborn. But in this convoy, in this moment, labels didn't matter. What mattered was simple. The chain had been rattled, and for once, the lion had bitten back. Ahead, the palace gates came into view, golden under the floodlights. Waiting inside, a council desperate for reassurance, and a leader ready to remind them that the price of dignity was eternal vigilance. Inside the presidential palace, the atmosphere buzzed with uneasy tension. Cabinet ministers, advisors, and military commanders crowded the grand hall, some whispering among themselves, some glued to their phones, all wondering how far the American retaliation might go. Traoré entered without fanfare, flanked by Diallo and Colonel Bako. His presence alone was enough to silence the murmurs. He walked to the head of the long ebony table, the same table where contracts had been signed, and too often souls sold. He didn't sit. Instead, he placed both palms on the polished wood and looked each minister in the eye. No notes, no speech, only raw, unfiltered truth. "You've heard the rumors," he began, his voice steady. "You've seen the fear. Yes, they will squeeze us. Yes, they will try to turn our own people against us. But they forget one thing. They forget who we are." He gestured toward the wide windows behind him where the city lights of Ouagadougou flickered like distant stars. "Out there, a boy is selling bread tonight so his sister can go to school tomorrow. A mother prays over her cooking fire that her children will know a life better than hers. Do you think they care about Washington's threats? Number. They care that we stand for them." A minister cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. President, what if the U.S. cuts aid, blocks our gold exports? We don't have reserves to last long." Traoré cut him off with a raised hand, not harsh, but final. "Then we build new partnerships. We look to our own people. We remember what Sankara taught us. He who feeds you controls you. Let us feed ourselves." The room fell silent, but the silence was no longer fear. It was a flicker of resolve catching fire. Diallo stepped forward with a sheaf of intelligence reports. "We've identified agents inside the ministries feeding information abroad." "Orders, Mr. President?" Traoré's eyes hardened. "Root them out, tonight. Loyalty is not optional." Outside the palace walls, drums echoed in distant neighborhoods, the sound of a people awakening to the knowledge that their leader had walked into the lion's den and walked out roaring. Word spread faster than the city's dusty winds. The president had defied America and survived the trap. In the crowded tea stalls and around late-night charcoal fires, people whispered and argued, some afraid, some emboldened. But all were wide awake, hearts pounding with a mixture of dread and hope. Inside the palace, loyal operatives moved like silent shadows. Diallo's security task force swept every ministry building, every office, every archive. 2 junior officials, both foreign-educated, both living well above their salaries, were dragged from a minister's residence at midnight. One of them was found clutching a burner phone with coded messages to a foreign number. Traoré watched the operation unfold from the security command room, a cold cup of strong black tea forgotten on the console beside him. Maps glowed under blue lights. Radio chatter crackled with updates. Colonel Bako stood beside him. "We have the traitors, sir. Confessions are only a matter of time." Traoré didn't celebrate. His gaze stayed fixed on the live camera feeds, city streets, palace gates, secret holding rooms. He knew removing these few snakes would not end the threat. New ones would slither in as long as foreign gold could buy loyalty. "Prepare a statement for dawn," he said quietly. "The people must hear the truth from me, not rumors." Diallo entered briskly, phone in hand. "Sir, we intercepted chatter. There may be a plot to storm the broadcast station tonight, disrupt your address." Traoré's eyes hardened to steel. "Then we hold it here inside the palace. I'll speak to my people from the same hall they tried to poison with fear." At that moment, a distant roll of thunder echoed over the city. The air crackled, heavy with coming rain, and something deeper, the knowledge that this time the storm belonged to them. Traoré straightened his jacket, feeling the weight of centuries behind him. If they wanted to fight in the shadows, then he would bring them into the sun. As the first crack of dawn painted the Ouagadougou sky in bruised shades of purple and gold, the people awoke not to fear, but to the thrum of something different, a collective pulse, fierce and stubborn. Inside the presidential palace's grand broadcast room, Traoré stood alone before the cameras. No teleprompter, no rehearsed lines. Behind him, the national flag rippled slightly in the breeze from an open window, as if reminding the world that this land belonged to its people, not to Washington, Paris, or anyone else. "Brothers and sisters," he began, voice steady, eyes unblinking. "Last night, you heard rumors. Today, you hear truth." He spoke plainly, how he had been summoned like a servant to bow before men who still believed Africa was a puppet on foreign strings, how he had refused every deal, every disguised threat, how, even now, some among them, neighbors, colleagues, ministers, had sold their loyalty for foreign coins. "But hear this," he said, leaning closer to the microphone, fire threading through every syllable. "No hand will ever hold this nation's throat again. If they wish to starve us, we shall feed ourselves. If they wish to isolate us, we shall find brothers in every free heart from Dakar to Johannesburg, from Havana to Beijing." Outside the palace gates, the crowd that had gathered overnight roared so loud that the sound leaked into the broadcast. Raw, unstoppable, alive. Traoré paused, letting the noise wash over him, a living reminder that no empire, no secret plot, no whispered threat could drown out a people once they decided to stand. He ended simply, "Let them come with their mercenaries, their lies, their hidden knives. Let them come. But when they do, they will find not just a president, but a nation awake." He stepped away from the microphone as the broadcast cut to black, leaving only the thunder of drums and voices rising with the sun. And far away, in offices from Langley to Paris, men who thought they understood Africa realized too late. The hunt had turned, and the hunted now had teeth. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters of Africa and beyond, what you've just heard is not just a story about betrayal and survival. It is a reminder that true freedom is never given. It is defended, inch by inch, heartbeat by heartbeat, by leaders who refuse to kneel and people who refuse to sleep. Ibrahim Traoré's defiance is not just about Burkina Faso. It is about every village, every city, every soul on this continent that has tasted chains and now demands dignity. It is about showing the world that Africa's story will no longer be written in foreign boardrooms, but in our streets, our fields, our classrooms, and in our courage to stand alone if we must. To those who still think they can dictate our future through bribes, threats, or hidden knives, we say, come see what happens when a people remember their power. Come see what happens when a lion wakes up. Thank you for watching. Stay awake, stay united, and stay ready. This is the Untold State, where truth has no fear. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories they don't want you to hear. Until next time, stay strong and stay free. Disclaimer: this video contains fictional content generated with the assistance of AI. It is not a real event and should not be interpreted as factual or representative of any individual's actual behavior. Viewer discretion is advised.